Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Delivery Layer podcast. I'm Solomon Khan, and I'm here with Maya Mikhailov. Maya, welcome.
Thank
She's
you. Thank you, Solomon.
the founder of SAVVI AI and a data friend, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you about machine learning and driving data or driving impact with data. Maya, do you want to introduce yourself, give the audience a bit of a background?
Absolutely. So my name is Maya, and prior to founding SAVVI AI, I founded another company called GP Shopper out in New York City, right where Solomon's located. And we grew in GP Shopper, and in 2017, we were acquired by Synchrony Financial, a large Fortune 50 bank here in the US. And after that, I led a division that built AI products and technologies for the next generation consumer out of Synchrony Financial. And then I just had to go back to my building roots. Like once you get the building bug, unfortunately, you can't shake it with antibiotics. You can't shake it with global pandemic. You just got to go back in and start something new and build.
That's great. Yeah, it's funny. I took over a decade off between my building itches between an old startup that I did in Delivery Layer.
I think that's a reasonable amount of time. I think that's normal. I think I jumped way too quickly back into it. I was like, wait a minute, I missed this. And it's almost like you get this weird startup pregnancy brain where you forget certain things about starting a company from 0 to 1. And then all of a sudden you're in it again. You're like, oh, was it like that before? I don't seem to remember that.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, certainly it's an interesting time to be starting a machine learning company. So maybe tell people a little bit about what SAVVI AI does, and then also how you think about where machine learning fits in today, because I think it's not just generative AI. That a lot of people are talking about that, but there's actually a lot more to it.
Absolutely. So SAVVI AI is a platform that helps actually product teams and data teams to build, to launch, and to manage their own AI apps in minutes so that they can see ROI quickly and deliver machine learning as a practical product for their workflows, for their products, so they can just level up as an organization without the need for additional resources, without the need for data scientists. They can just self-empower to take advantage of machine learning and AI like never before.
Cool. And, it's interesting because I feel like that gap between data science notebook and a customer-facing product, or even if it's an internal customer, sometimes seems insurmountable for certain organizations. Like how have you seen that play out? Have you seen that play out? How does SAVVI AI fit into solving that type of problem?
Absolutely. And I think there's been this evolution. Machine learning and AI, they're not new concepts. Obviously, they've been around for decades, and the technology has made it easier for more teams to get involved with machine learning. Data streaming systems and the evolution of data has coincided to make it more readily available. But I think of the world sort of in these Gen 1 tools and Gen 2 tools. And the Gen 1 tools, which started over a decade ago, are some of the big names that like the H2Os of the world in data science. And they were started by data scientists solving a very known problem for data scientists, which is, gosh, I really don't like just using Jupyter notebooks. I really don't like using R, using Python. This seems really clunky. Why can't we have a better interface for building models? Because that was the problem. Like, how are we going to build these models and tune these models? And, since that problem set occurred 10 to 15 years ago, the industry it evolved. We realized that the problem has shifted from how do you make a model to exactly what you said, Solomon. Like, how do you get a model into production? Like, great, we've been able to make these models, but for a business, this isn't a science experiment. This isn't lab work. This is how can we make use of these tools? How can we make use of this new technology to drive business results? And I think that's, we see SAVVI as sort of that Gen 2 tool, where it's at first, we had these tools that were just made for specialists and just made for companies with large infrastructure, with large teams that were focused on data science. And now, like many other industries in technology have evolved, we're at a new generation where now it's about how can we level up the entire organization, and how can we take this technology from just the domain of these specialists and of these big infrastructures and bring it to everybody everywhere, so everybody can upskill and everybody can supercharge their products and workflows with machine learning and AI.
Okay. So on the one hand, that sounds exciting, and on the other hand, that sounds a little scary, because I have been in organizations where I've worked with product people or engineers who like really knew what they were talking about, and I would totally trust to do certain things. And then I've been in organizations, or even within the same organization, sometimes you don't trust your product people to be able to independently operate in some of these domains, or rather they would say that they don't trust themselves. This isn't a judgment about them that they wouldn't say about themselves. How do you find democratized data playing out in the real world? Is it that by enabling the easier use cases for everybody, you still have data teams doing it 90% of the time, but then 10% of the time you have other people doing it? Is it that actually you're finding when you enable people, they upskill and level up, and they're actually able to do a lot more complicated things than we might expect? How does that play out on the customer side?
Well, I think practically it plays out in, listen, AI and machine learning is going to be the next big digital transformation. And you can't just silo it in your organization and say, hey, we have an AI center of excellence and only these people can touch this new technology. I mean, imagine if back in the day we said, hey, there's an internet center of excellence and a digital center of excellence, and only this team is allowed to use digital tools, and the rest of the organization, you better get comfortable, with your pocket calculators and your spiral bound notebooks, because no one else is doing digital transformation. I mean, as a technology evolves, it's ridiculous to say that the rest of the organization can't and shouldn't take advantage of it, especially in a technology that's going to have so much impact across the business as machine learning is. So I challenge the idea that certain people can't and shouldn't AI, that it is only the domain of folks with PhDs. Listen, folks with PhDs and multiple master's degrees who live and breathe linear algebra are great people. They're wonderful people. We have them on our team. But the reality is that in order for an organization to really be able to take advantage of machine learning, they have to be able to get it to these frontline and these business teams, because they know what the business problems are. They don't just know what the data problems are, they know what the business headaches they're dealing with every day, which is like, if you're in logistics, which truck should I roll today to get this package to this location on time in a cost-effective manner? Or if you're in a payments company, we have these reoccurring transactions coming in, and they're coming in by the tens of thousands. How do we know which ones are fraud and which ones are legitimate, or which ones just need a human review? I mean, these shouldn't be bottlenecked in one department of an organization. We need to start feeling comfortable with other teams collaborating with this technology.
I really like that, actually. And I think that what you said about you're not going to have a single AI center of excellence that is ultimately going to be able to handle all of the business needs for a diverse organization with needs big and small is totally correct.
I mean, for the big problems, absolutely. I mean, we came from banking, so you think about problems like fraud and anti-money laundering. Those are endless problems that need a team's resources every day, all day, for years, because it's not going to go away, and it morphs and it's constantly changing. I'm talking about your frontline business problems, places where almost right now you're using a hand-coded if-then statement. You're using a decision tree. You're using somebody looking at an Excel spreadsheet that's like 2 weeks old saying, okay, I think we should do this, or wait, we should have done that 2 weeks ago. So you're looking at situations that are frequently occurring business problems that really need the teams that have those problems occurring in their departments to be able to solve them. And then some of these big chunky problems like, like I said, like fraud, AML, protein folding, self-driving cars, all of these big AI problems, absolutely. Like leave that to the data scientists. Let them noodle on them because they're constantly evolving and changing.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. And although it's interesting on the PhD side of it, because I find that for most business problems, number one, you don't need the type of things that you learned in a PhD in order to solve them. It's sort of like you don't need a PhD in material science to be a house builder, right? But you might need a PhD in material science if you are working at a 2x4 construction company to understand your process and how it changes the wood before it gets delivered to the builders who are using the 2x4s. And I think that there's definitely that sort of distinction in data work as well, where you've got a lot of the core libraries that are very sophisticated and use a lot of sophisticated math, but to use the libraries, you just need to call the libraries.
Yeah, exactly. I think you need the right tool for the right job, Solomon. You're absolutely correct. You don't always need a cannon to go after a mosquito. Sometimes you just need a purpose-built tool that's like, okay, this is what we need for a small to mid-sized problem. This is what we need for a big problem. And like I said, listen, PhDs are great. And in fact, it's funny that you bring up a material science PhD. We had a gentleman on our team. We have a gentleman on our team who was pursuing a PhD in material science, and he has since pivoted. But the point being is that it's the ability for these teams to say, I know the problems I'm facing, and I don't need to go to another department to have them tell me what problems I innately know. And also, even with machine learning, I've been recently kind of reading a new book about kind of machine usefulness, that we should strive for the author of the book argues that we should strive for machine usefulness versus machine intelligence, that we need to make these tools useful for people so that we can really level up and we can really upskill instead of just shifting labor around from one person to another. He gives the example of self-checkout lanes in grocery stores and at convenience stores. And he's like, well, that's kind of shifting labor around. It's not really an innovation. You're just saying, okay, instead of a cashier doing it, now you have the shopper doing it. But true machine usefulness will take that labor off of someone's plate.
That's interesting. How does that relate, or what are the implications of that for the org structures of a traditional data team? You mentioned before that it's tough to have the AI center of excellence, and I've found that most companies have a data team, which is the de facto machine learning center of excellence. And to what degree is that a fit? Is that not a fit for what organizations need? How do you think about that?
I have a hard time with the kind of question of should it be centralized or should it be decentralized, because obviously different organizations work differently. So I don't think there's one right answer of like we should centralize everything for all organizations or we should never centralize anything for any organization. The problem I have with a centralized structure often, and the concept of like a data czar or a chief data officer, I understand why that standardization makes sense. I really do, especially in a massive sprawling organization that may have locations around the world, may have different divisions, et cetera. But sometimes what I see is it's trying to create standardization, and instead it leads to inefficiency and bottlenecks, where they're trying to do a one-size-fits-all approach to data solutioning for product teams instead of asking the product teams, what do you want? How can I empower you to work faster? And how can I empower you with the data you need at the time that you need it to make your product smarter or make your workflows better? So I think that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but it has to be almost a hybrid, where you can still have this power team that is solving these big chunky problems for companies. And at the same time, you can still kind of take a high-low approach where you're still empowering the folks on the ground to solve their own problems and with the data they need when they need it to do it. So I think it almost has to be a blended hybrid approach. I understand how it started centralized because with every new technology, usually the go-to approach is like, let's grab a group of smart people and they'll figure it out for us. But we're at a level of maturity with machine learning and AI where we have to start thinking about how can the rest of the organization now use this tool because it's fundamentally going to be a competitive advantage for the next decade and beyond.
Yeah, I agree with that. My last job, this was, I think, one of the most important decisions that I made in terms of how I was going to lead the data team, which was I had the opportunity to sort of end/take over some of the tools and processes that were done by a lot of the functional teams. So, for example, did I want to own Salesforce data for the sales team, or did I want to own some of the marketing platform data infrastructure that people were using for day-to-day data-driven decision-making for marketing purposes, but they had spun up independently, and then I came in as a data leader. And I decided that I did not want to own that stuff, and I wanted to let teams I wanted to advise on it and sort of be a part of be a good partner to those business leaders in those groups. But I did not want to only have things flow through me, because that was just a recipe for disaster. And
well, then everyone blames you for everything, Solomon. You're like the one neck to throttle here.
Exactly.
Is that, oh, it must be Solomon's fault that we didn't have this report ready on time. It must be Solomon's fault. But like, I think you had such a great approach, which is like, how can I be a great partner and a great stakeholder in this discussion? And how can I spread best practices through the organization while at the same time telling these teams, hey, you have to take control over this. Like, you're telling me you need this data. You're now having to take control of your own data. You can't just use this as an excuse to say, well, I didn't get XYZ because I was waiting for this data team to accomplish this.
Yeah. And I think there's something that is not talked about enough around strategic decisions of this type, which is time to market and time to value. And I've found that most, and this actually I think applies to software as well. It would be better if everything went through the data team, and the data team did a great job, and we had all the benefits of having it go through the data team. That's obvious. The real question is, what does that look like in terms of when the results are going to happen, and how badly would that impact the business between now and then in a way that you can't recover from? Like, if you miss a window to do a certain task or to have certain marketing campaigns happen, the world changes, that window closes, and people hit or don't hit their numbers that quarter. So,
and 100%. And why are you putting the burden on the data team to create business priority? I mean, every single department is going to come to you, the marketing department, the finance department, one of your product departments. Every department is going to come to you and say, I have a burning request, because nobody has non-burning requests. It's always like 4-alarm fire time all the time. But basically, the problem here is that how can you basically say the data team is now responsible for sorting out business priorities all the time? Because that's what you're ultimately asking them to do. And you're asking them to be put in a position where everyone's a bit mad at them all the time, when really they're a collaborative partner that's super important in helping facilitate all these teams accomplishing their goals.
Yeah, totally agree. So obviously, I imagine it's been a very interesting seat to be in, starting an AI company and then having the generative AI wave sort of hit you out of nowhere, or probably
just
not
come
out of nowhere.
Crashing, the tsunami of generative.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think anybody could have predicted how quickly the business world would have said that they were interested in doing something with AI. And so what was that like when it first happened? And also, how are you advising clients, and how are you working with that? Or like, what what are you doing to either harness that or to help companies navigate through these AI times?
Well, I think a little bit of it is just helping folks get a grip on what's kind of AI fact versus AI fiction. Because look, generative is really exciting, and it hit a nerve because it was very understandable AI. A lot of the machine learning that was happening up until generative, for many people, it was behind the scenes. Your packages just arrived on time. The plane was at the gate when it was supposed to be. Things just worked, but you didn't really think about why they suddenly worked better. And generative, it was very tactile in a way. It gave people something to play with, and they could create with it, which made it viscerally really exciting. It can create new music and new art and new text and so much more. And so I think that when it hit a nerve, there was this concept from the boardroom on down of, we need to do something with this. This is exciting. It's like the iPhone all over again, but even more exciting in a weird way, because now I can create art and I can create sonnets in Dr. Seuss style meets like Dr. Dre style. But I think for companies, where the rubber hits the road is translating that excitement into practical applications that their team can use. So I think the first thing that we often do is just talk to teams about, what are your business problems? Are they really generative AI problems? I get that it's cool. It's really fun to write memos with ChatGPT instead of having to think about them yourself. It certainly saves a lot of time. But what is the problem that you're trying to solve in your workflow and in your product? And do you need more of a predictive or decisioning AI, or do you need more generative AI that creates, or do you need AI that looks through data, whether it be historical data sets, and makes future predictions on what's going to happen next, or actively makes decisions based on what your goals are, your outcomes that you desire? So I think just sorting that out first is what's necessary. And then also helping companies understand the landscape of limitations with generative insofar as like data privacy limitations. I still think it's amazing and hilarious that instantly everybody was like super comfortable putting all their company's proprietary secret data into ChatGPT because they didn't want to write a memo to their boss, and they had to be told not to. They had to be told, oh, wait, please stop doing that. Or, oh, wait, some of the answers you might get back are not exactly accurate. So, if you're going to go into court, please don't rely on fake cases it may cite as a form of how you're working from now on. So there's still the education process is still actively happening. And I think for companies, it's just sorting out what can they practically accomplish right now, given what data they have, what their goals are, and is it about generative? Is it about predictive? Is it about decisioning AI? What makes sense for them right now?
Yeah. For the company, or for the boards and for the CEOs that are telling the people on their teams, hey, this is a big thing, we need to be looking at it now. Like, are they right or are they wrong?
They're not wrong. So they're definitely right in that this is a big thing. It is transformative. It will create efficiency in certain processes. I read an article recently how there was this leaked document, I don't know how leaked it was, of employees at Amazon had come up with generative AI use cases. And like one of the most popular ones are, these famous Amazon memos, because nobody likes PowerPoint presentations at Amazon. They want to write memos. Well, the most obvious business case that was like upvoted a lot was, hey, why don't we use generative AI to write these memos? It's like, great. It just shows you how excited people are about writing these memos and how much time they spend on them. But part of the time they spend on them is sorting through and crystallizing their thoughts. So now if you're just using it as a writing hack because you don't like writing, well, will that necessarily help you sort and crystallize your thoughts and think about, the different angles of the project? Or are you just hacking writing and you're going to get a generic response that doesn't really advance your cause for this project? So it's interesting. They're right to pay attention to it. They're right that it's going to cause a lot of business efficiency moving forward. I think where they're still struggling is, does this apply to them? And in many cases, the answer is no. The answer is, standard predictive AI that your company may be doing or should be doing, instead of the decision trees that are literally brittle and broken that you have that are like 50 plus years old. Like, start smaller, start with things that you can fix that may have a lot more operational impact.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. And I think, to your point, some businesses are going to be completely transformed, and you as a leader need to be full throttle on how you're going to stay relevant. And some businesses are not going to be changed substantially.
Exactly. And, maybe I think McKinsey kind of backed down from, hey, everybody is going to lose their jobs, to, okay, maybe 10% of your job will change.
Yeah.
Well, there's a significant gap between we are just going to start cutting jobs left and right in the economy to, I think we might actually create more jobs if everyone's job was 10% more efficient.
Yeah, it's not surprising to see the quick backtrack on a lot of this. And just coming from my experience leading a business where we were our business was based on data that was the output of an AI model. And it's not so simple to navigate when those models are wrong, and how you manage when the models are wrong. And for internal purposes, it is less existential of a problem than when that actually goes out to customers and customers see what could be crazy hallucinations from a model. There's
tremendous risk, Solomon. Exactly what you're saying. There's reputational risk. There's potential legal risk. Like, if you give bad financial advice, or better yet, illegal financial advice based on being over-reliant on a generative model with no guardrails, I think what makes me more excited about this new generation of tools that we are a part of, admittedly, is that there is this focus, though, on transparency and auditability that I think before, when AI was sequestered in and siloed and saying, okay, only certain people can use AI, there wasn't this concept of explain it to me. It was, I can't explain it to you. You'll never figure it out. You don't have enough math to figure this out. And now there is more accountability, and not just because the regulatory environment is quickly evolving, like you saw what Europe just did, and what the US is inevitably will do is pass some regulatory guidelines, but also because other teams have come to these AI teams and said, listen, we're not going to feel comfortable launching this unless you're transparent about what it's doing, unless I can audit individual decisions, unless I have some guardrails so I can make sure it's playing by our business rules no matter what happens, because our business rules are tried and true rules that affect our reputation or the legal landscape that we play in.
Yeah, totally. So talk through a little bit more. What are some of because we've both been in it, leading actual businesses, and one of the natural outcomes of every business is now going to have some sort of AI is that they're going to have to deal and learn all of the things that we've learned the hard way. So what are some of the brick walls that these businesses are going to find themselves driving into?
Well, I have to tell you, in working in machine learning for a while now, folks are running into so many brick walls, they might as well be the Kool-Aid man. I mean, it's like, oh yeah. But the first brick wall that I find that companies run into is almost the brick wall of biting off way more than they can chew. Is now that they're bought into AI, or the board and executive management is bought into AI, the gut instinct is, let's take the biggest, thorniest problem we have at the business, the one that affects almost everybody at the business. Let's start with that as our first AI project. And that's so dangerous on so many levels because, first of all, it's going to be your hardest problem. It's going to involve the most stakeholders. It's going to have the longest timeline to production. It's going to have the most scrutiny, eyeballs, and hesitation. And if that's what you're cutting your teeth on, you're almost setting yourself up to failure. Whereas I constantly tell companies, start with, we do this in product all the time. we like rank our projects based on, what value will it bring to the organization? What's the risk, to the organization? How hard is it to complete? We shirt size things all the time. And yet with AI, we jump into, I want to do the biggest thing ever, or I'm going to be such a winner. And that's not how you win. You win with improvements that are measurable, that have fast time to value, that you can action with the team that you already have. So that's the first brick wall. And then the second brick wall, and I will controversially say this, Solomon, revolves around data. I think there is this prerequisite paralysis that occurs around data, where there have been data transformation projects happening at organizations for a while now, at most organizations.
Yeah.
And there's this paralysis that the data has to be in the state of ultimate perfection before it can be used for machine learning. It's almost become an orthodoxy of like this constant endless project around data, and then we have to fix the data, and the data is never perfect. And that creates a problem because you've stopped the organization dead in its tracks, and you've created such a big prerequisite where you said you can't start until we get the data to this idealized state, and this idealized state may never happen. And because of that, we can't now move on to using this data. And that's another problem that we often work with teams of saying, look, you actually don't need, in many machine learning use cases, you actually don't need as much data as you think. You don't need petabytes of data sitting in a data lake. You need just, 1,000 rows of clean data. And you can start learning. And it's going to be better than the decision tree that you've been relying upon. And it's going to be more nimble. And you can create a continuous learning system out of it where you're constantly feeding in new data. It's about how you structure it. But if you sacrifice the good for the great, and the great being this idealized data set, you're never going to really help your organization, and you're never going to achieve that competitive advantage with machine learning.
Yeah. That second statement is highly controversial. And
I know. I'm gonna get like data hate mail. I'm anticipating from your listening audience, but it's not that I don't appreciate the work of data transformation, of data cleansing, of data observability. It's not that I don't think these things matter. It's quite the opposite. They do matter, but if you say that they matter so much that nothing can be done until they are in the state of perfection, then literally your organization will do nothing.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, some CFO will be like, wait, how much should we spend on this data infrastructure? And what did we get out of it? You're like, better data, but the pipes are so clean. It's so easy to use. Great. Who's using it? Well, no one yet, but it will be. And you're gonna run headfirst into the brick wall that's called the CFO.
Yeah. I agree. I've gotten a lot of flack from the various data governance and other data people on LinkedIn for saying this also. But I think that it also mixes up the cause and the effect, right? The good data becomes good data after it gets beat up in real life use cases, not through premature optimization exercise that you do on the data engineering side before anybody actually uses the data for anything.
Exactly. I mean, it has to be a balance. Like everything in life, Solomon, things have to be kept in balance where you can still achieve those overarching data goals, but let teams get their wins. If you really hijack product teams and business teams from getting low-level wins while you accomplish your data goals, you're actually doing yourself a disservice in the data organization.
Yeah. And I actually think that your point about data needing to be far less clean and perfect than you might think in order to start driving value is also very true. And I think this is sort of like the data teams in the world are not in trouble in general because they have a data product that's being used in so much and the customers love it and it's driving so much revenue, but the people are getting fired because of data quality. That's not the problem that's plaguing data leaders. The problem that's plaguing data leaders is they can't get those products they can't get enough products that are being used and loved by customers, and that to the point that the data quality is biting them. And
exactly. It behooves, like, that's why I think machine learning and data teams, I mean, they go hand in hand. Because machine learning is like taking all that investment in that infrastructure that data teams have been quietly doing behind the scenes, mostly. I mean, let's be honest. There's no generative data yet that's happened, but it's taking all that investment that these data teams have been doing behind the scenes, and it really gives it this new avenue of automation of saying, hey, we didn't just give you a cool Excel spreadsheet that you didn't look at, or another sort of data dashboard that may or may not have been used. We're now making that data create smarter infrastructure in our company. It is now, when they said data was oil, well, oil's not useful unless it's powering something. It's not in and of itself valuable. It's only valuable because it powers like our planes and our trucks and, et cetera. Now that's what machine learning is. It is sort of that engine that sits on top of that data saying, give me some data. I'm going to show you what I can accomplish on top of this in an automated form. And that's what's really exciting. And that's why I also think data teams need to make sure that their company can use machine learning more, because it really does help them.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. So given that then, and I know you talked about this a little bit before, but where do you see responsibility for that sort of data product sitting inside organizations? Is it a joint responsibility where everybody should be thinking about that? Is it and how do most organizations that don't have that mindset, how do you recommend that they get there?
It is a bit of a joint responsibility. I will still say this. You can't just put one person in charge and say, here's our new data czar, and by default, everything has to run through this one organization. I mean, I understand how it would be great being the data czar then. But I think for the organization, they're going to fall over themselves, because individual teams have different needs and they know their needs, and sometimes much better sometimes they don't even articulate correctly what they need from the data team. And that's kind of part of that education and evolution process of just even helping these product teams and these frontline teams work with the data teams and saying, how can we better articulate why we're asking what we're asking? Because I think that's where I see a lot of communication problem occurring, is a product team will go to the data team and say, hey, or a sales team will go to the data team and say, hey, I need this new dashboard that tells me, sales by product in the Midwest region. And instead of sort of interviewing and pushing back and saying, okay, but what are you hoping to accomplish? Or what are you trying to accomplish with this? There's this, okay, we'll build you this product. And then it doesn't get used. And they're like, and the data team says, see what happens. These people, they come to us and they ask us for things, and then we build them and we spend all this time, and then they don't use them. And then they say the data team is useless. And when it's really that's not the question. They were trying to speak each other's language unsuccessfully. The product team was putting things in terms of what the data team can provide me, and the data team wasn't thinking, well, what's the product team actually using this for? And maybe all they need is an API, and they can use it in a different capacity that has nothing to do with data visualization. Yeah,
that definitely makes sense, and I think that's that's like the not and it's so true. It's the advice that everybody gets. You have to get to the core and the need behind the need, the question behind the question. Okay.
And that's why I think empowering, that's why, and just to go back to the point, Solomon, that's why, at SAVVI, we're trying to empower these product teams, because often they know what their problem is, and maybe they're not articulating it correctly to the data team, but they know what problem they're trying to solve. They know what KPI they're trying to move. In fact, sometimes they're even bonused on it. So they know what they're trying to impact. So let them go impact it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have personally, and obviously I have a tool now, but for me, one of the big things that I think people don't think about when they have the sort of data person like when they haven't gotten their productization down, and that is just such a miss, is how employee turnover affects a lot of these processes. And you'll have a data scientist who might build a great system to support a business leader. And then if they leave, suddenly that system, no one knows how to retrain it. Nobody knows how to get the outputs out. And it just becomes, at best, something that someone can run, but that's rare. And then you have to rebuild it again. To what degree does that play into like SAVVI as a tool and like the value proposition that you bring to companies?
I think that's an excellent point. And I think, when we talk to our clients, some of them have gone through this exact problem where they've gotten an external consultant or they've used a tool that to them was a bit black box. They didn't know how that tool worked. It was just like, trust us, we're going to improve. We're going to be a point solution for this one process you have. And then what happens is, someone leaves and that's it. Or the consultant, you can't find the consultant and you're having a problem because all of a sudden you had a black swan event in the market, like interest rates rising or whatnot, and the model's broken and nobody's thought about creating a continuous learning system. I think what was really important for us at SAVVI, because we were ultimately a product team at heart that was building products using AI, is that SAVVI has to be a collaborative, easy to use tool. Like that was kind of our North Star, is it has to be about teams working together towards their product and business goals. And it had to be goal oriented and it had to be easy for folks to onboard. And, our head of client services will tell you that she's trained people in an hour and they've gone off to the races and, built 15 different AI apps that they can use for different purposes. But it had to be easy because of employee turnover and because of accessibility. So if you make that your North Star, you're constantly thinking about how does this just become a tool that the existing team can feel real ownership over, versus us coming in there saying, we're smarter than you, we know your business better than you, we know math better than you. Like that's the wrong approach. The right approach is, you're great. You know your business. You know what your problems are. I'm just going to help you get there with something that you can learn and you can learn quickly so that it doesn't become this odious process of like, okay, now you have to have like 4 months of certifications in order to use this tool. And if that person leaves, well, find somebody else who has 4 months of time.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's exactly one of the real benefits of having a platform like that. For people that want to get in touch or follow along with what you're doing, like where are you online? What should they do to be in touch?
Awesome. Well, they can absolutely follow me on LinkedIn. It's Maya Mikhailov, Maya M at LinkedIn. They can follow SAVVI online on LinkedIn as well. We have a very small Insta presence. I think it only has 2 photos on it. But we also have a small Twitter presence, but we're primarily at SAVVIAI.com or on LinkedIn is our primary socials.
All right. Great. Well,
eventually, I do have my little sister convincing me that we need a TikTok presence. I'm just not quite there yet.
I mean,
do you have a TikTok presence, Solomon?
I'm squatting on the delivery layer TikTok name. I haven't done any videos yet. But
all right, I am here to spread and help your videos go viral. I mean, I don't know what a viral TikTok data video looks like, but I want to see it. I'm really here for it.
We're just gonna have to highlight what you just said, and that could be the viral TikTok video.
I doubt it, but you never know. You never know how viral works. I've often thought that when I think about it, it never makes sense to me, and then I see it, and I'm like, oh, that made sense.
Yeah, I also write all my stuff on LinkedIn. I cannot tell in advance which ones are gonna blow up or not, and it's been interesting to see.
It has. I feel the same way. Out. When I put a lot of thought in it, I'm like, this is clever. It's like 2 views. And when I put 0 thought into something, it's like, how did I get 10,000 views on something I put less than 5 minutes of thought into?
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, Maya, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And everybody go check out Maya and SAVVI AI. And thanks for listening to the Delivery Layer podcast. And see you on the next episode.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Solomon.